Guy, Deputy Consul General, and distinguished guest dignitaries. It's a very happy occasion to see all of you here. For as long as I remember, maybe 30 plus years, every elected officials of India who came to USA on a mission, diplomat posted at embassy in DC or consulate in Atlanta, Chicago, Houston, San Francisco, or New York, always rightfully praised Indian Americans as a true ambassador of India or honorary ambassador. I never thought that I was expected to do that job in a kind of official capacity. Let me explain. Consul Vipul Dev, who was supposed to be doing what I'm doing right now, worked very hard to make this event possible. Became a father 3 days ago of a baby boy. He was supposed to do MCs, and now I was asked to do that one. Let's wish best wishes to Vipul Bhai, his wife, and newly born baby boy. We kick off the event with a welcome address by Sri Ranjit Bhai. He has won the hearts and minds of the community unlike any others. And I say with all humility because I have been to this place for over 40 years and have interacted with most consul generals, and the big list is outside on the wall plan. His support of Shantipan and any of my requests on behalf of Shantipan has always received affirmative responses. Please welcome our one and only Ranjit Bhai.
Namaste and good evening, dear friends. Thank you, Shanti Fund, for getting together with us to celebrate Black History Month. It is almost a tradition here in this consulate that we celebrate Black History Month and the contribution of African Americans to this great country. For the last couple of years, we've been doing it virtually, but with wishes and kindness of everybody, we are here together doing it in physical format. Today is a day to pay tribute, to remember the sacrifice, aspirations, hopes, struggles, and all that people from the African American community went through in this country. There are many lessons for us to learn from the struggle of our brothers and sisters here, and they deeply, in one way or the other, resonate in our own thought and action. For Indians, it is a day, or for the Indian community here, to remember Dr. Martin Luther King, who resonates very deeply in India. You may not know, but he is so popular. In one way or the other, his memory is relived on a daily basis almost in four corners of India. That is how popular he is. He was a Gandhian himself. He drew a lot of inspiration from a father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi. And Mahatma Gandhi himself, he never came to America. But in his own struggle in South Africa, 21 years that he lived there, he cared not just for the freedom of India, struggle for Indian people in South Africa, but also of the native South Africans equally. And there is a deep connect and a deep resonance of thought and action in what he did there and what we are celebrating today here. So that is how close we are. But let me give you another perspective of India. Another slice of our thought and action, bond and ties, which brings us and what we are doing far away here to America. And in some manner again brings up a similarity of thought in celebration of Black History Month and our own actions. Many of you would know that the Indian freedom struggle on the African continent. Leaders like Kenneth Fonda drew a lot of support. We supported them in their own struggle, independence, anti-imperialist movement. Several countries in Africa shared a sense of comfort with us, a sense of solidarity with us, drawing inspiration from the Indian national movement, and our leaders, African national leaders, giving a helping hand to those on the African continent. That strong ties endures. Today, we have very strong relations with our brothers and sisters on the African continent. We have very strong political ties, very strong development cooperation ties, underpinned by South-South cooperation. Just recently, last month, we had Voice of Global South conference in India where 125 countries participated. Almost the whole of the African continent was present. Just to give you that what we are celebrating here also is as much part of our international relations and our own connect with the world. Yes, here with America, with American history, but as much with people here who have connect elsewhere with that history as well. So thank you once again, Shanti Fund, Arvind Bhai, for bringing us together. Few words of special thank and welcome to our very distinguished guest today, Dr. Timothy Sams, President of SUNY, Old Westbury Campus. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Our another keynote speaker, she's yet to come. Hopefully she'll join, Dr. Bernardine Waller, and our distinguished musicians, and Madam So Young Lee, Segredo, and all the performers who are there with her. Thank you very much, and I look forward to keynote speakers, the discussions, and let's celebrate Black History Month. Let's celebrate this pride, this beautiful part of our common heritage, of our shared history, with a lot of fanfare and with a lot of pride once again. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Welcome, Dr. Waller. Now I would like to introduce a multi-talented artist who is a volunteer of Shanti Fund and professionally a school teacher. I have witnessed her performance at Carnegie Hall, and she always happily goes above and beyond to make events lively and meaningful. Of course, you could read her abbreviated bio that took full page in the program booklet. Please welcome Sonia. is so youngly, but I never expected Dr. Waller to be that good too. We might as well have you next year for the singing thing as opposed to giving the presentation and keynote speaker. It is my extreme pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Timothy E. Sams. He is president of SUNY Old Westbury. Upon assuming his presidency, I reached out to him for a meeting at the time when COVID was still a big concern. Obviously, he preferred to meet over the Zoom, and I requested that first meeting should be in person. It was slated to be 15, 20 minutes maybe, but it went on more than 40 minutes. He listened very intently and saw everything I gave him about Shantifan, another organization I represent, and he verbally agreed quickly to accept the proposal of Gandhi Lecture Series at SUNY Old Westbury. Thank you for that one. It was a natural second phase to build upon Gandhi Peace Garden at the university. On the back cover of Shantifan calendar, and we have extra calendar over here, those who are not on our mailing list, please take one. Our gem of statement about Gandhi Peace Garden and Dr. Sams about Gandhi Lecture Series. Please welcome Dr. Sams.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you, Ms. Lee, for that. Thank you so much. So I'm not going to take too much time, but let me start by thanking everyone in the room for taking the time out of their busy schedule to observe Black History Month. There's no requirement for you to do so, and yet you understood the importance of it, particularly when we understand that history is the birthplace of every people, right? And at the moments at which histories intersect, then we understand not only our common humanity, our common history, but also our common destiny. I want to thank Council General. Once again, it's good to see you, and I hope to see you many, many more times. I also want to thank the Deputy Council. Pleasure meeting you. Welcome to New York City. And I hope you like it, most of all of your stops in your journey, in your career. I want to thank the Shanti Fund. And most especially, I think you can see that Mr. Arvind and I are fond of one another. And we plan to make a lot of music together. And so thank you for inviting me. Thank you for allowing me to share some words with you today. And I want to thank the band. I want to thank Miss Lee, because I didn't know you were going to sing Lift Every Voice and Sing. And you did it in fine fashion. So thank you for that. And for those of you who don't know, Lift Every Voice and Sing is the African American or the Negro National Anthem. And that's why we ask that you stand. If you watched the Super Bowl, you saw it. They sung by Shirley, right? And she too did a great job. So I want to make sure that I got all my thank yous out before I give you my remarks for this evening. So if I omitted anyone in expressing my appreciation for being allowed to be up here for a few moments and to share with you my thoughts and ideas, please pardon it to my head and not my heart, okay? I do want to share tonight two fundamental things. The first is I'm going to give you a couple of African concepts, all right? And it's not that because it's Black History Month I want to share these concepts with you. It's because without my giving you these concepts, you would not get or understand at the depth at which I find it to be important the remainder of my remarks. The second part of my remarks are about my predecessor at the State University of New York at Old Westbury. Many of you have heard about the Reverend Dr. Calvin O. Butts III. Many of you know that he passed away this past October. And many of you know about the fact that not only was he the pastor of Abyssinian Baptist Church for over 30 years, and if you just take that one little piece, that is impressive in and of itself. Because when you think about what it meant to fall into the shoes of his predecessors first, DeWitt Proctor. DeWitt Proctor was not only one of the greatest pastors, bishops in the history of African America. He was truly that, but he was also the president of Virginia Theological Seminary, right? He was a brilliant scholar. Not only did Dr. Butts fill those shoes, but he also filled the shoes of Reverend Adam Clayton Powell, right? So only a couple of people do we ever know about in our history could have walked into that space, but I'm not here to talk about that, right? And as you can tell, I'd be quite enthusiastic to be able to do so. He was also the president who I succeeded after having served 21 years at SUNY Old Westbury. That's a long time. The average tenure for a president is 5 years. If you're doing a good job, it's 7. If you do it 21, you're favored by God. So we know where his strength came from and his help from, but I'm not here to talk about that either, because those are well documented, well understood items as it relates to Dr. Butts. I'm here to talk about something else from a particular perspective, and that is as an African man. As an African man, who Dr. Butts was to me and to so many African people, not just domestically, but around the world. And at the end of my remarks, I actually am going to make a proposal that's rarely done, merely because not everybody warrants it, right? But it comes out of the particular African cosmology. And so you got to get the front end in order to get the back end. And so let me do the front end first. So my remarks tonight are not about Dr. Butts' contributions to his church, to SUNY Old Westbury, but about his contributions to African people worldwide. And most of you know Dr. Butts passed away this past fall. He was a pastor of Harlem's storied and largest church, Abyssinian. He was also the president, as I mentioned, of my college for over 22 years. But I want you to know I didn't come to Dr. Butts through SUNY Old Westbury. I came to Dr. Butts as a young African-American male, as an African-American who became keenly interested in the condition of African people worldwide. And I became interested in Dr. Butts as a figure who represented the transformational ideas that I aspired to reach. Dr. Butts was recognized not only by African people, but people worldwide for those who obsess in the ongoing effort for oppressed people to gain dignity and to achieve justice globally. As I share my comments about Dr. Butts this Black History Month, I want to introduce you to some and remind the rest of you about some relevant African concepts that relate to his leadership. By doing this, I'm hopefully situating Dr. Butts as an actor upon the broader world stage. And we can understand him as a wonderfully complex leader whose life represents the best of a particular African male leadership archetype, thus making him worthy of veneration in an Africological sense. Veneration in an Africological sense, and I'll explain that in a second. But the terms I want to introduce to you. First is African elder. Second, deification and veneration. Thirdly, dirge, D-I-R-G-E. Fourth, the concept of a Morehouse man. Okay? And then finally, nomo. So you're going to have to hold on to these ideas, otherwise you're going to miss the point, folks. All right? So come with me. There's an African proverb that says, you will not live forever. So leave a legacy. Which is exactly what I want to talk about, the legacy that Dr. Butts left to 35 million African Americans and 1.5 billion Africans worldwide. Francois Loco Duna writes about African elders. From medicines and child rearing to politics and religion, elders are wise, dignified, and powerful. They are guardians of peace and order within the community, carriers of traditions and living legends. Noah Lumon Abanya, in an article, The Changing Privileges and Challenges of Older People in Contemporary African Society, says, in the traditional African society, older people were highly esteemed because of the important roles they played by helping to integrate the society, preserve its cultural values, transmit knowledge and skills, settle disputes, and educate the young. But what happens to the greatest of elders, those whose work is beyond ordinary and ultimately elevates the condition of the community, those whose contributions to the culture and the propagation of the people's highest values are immense, or what we call a legacy? They are venerated or deified. To be deified means to be placed within the pantheon of all important and indispensable ancestors of that people. These ancestors are the ones who the people refuse to let die in the spiritual sense. And as long as their names are uttered and their import reflected upon by the people, they continue to live in the life of that community, not simply as a memory, but as an ongoing influential presence for that community. Thus, I am using the term deified not in reference to God, but rather to be regarded with very great respect. At important moments in the life of the people, the ancestors are invited in their effort to achieve communalism and wholeness. The act of summoning their presence is called pouring libations. Many of you have heard about that. But what that means is, in an event like this, just like the drums would bring us in to a formal ceremony, so too, in order for the ceremony to formally begin, two things must happen. One, you have to get permission for that ceremony to begin from the elder in the room, generally the oldest person who's willing to fess up to being the oldest, right? Okay? Right? So that's first. And then secondly, you pour libation to those ancestors who are relevant to that community. And you cannot begin that ceremony. You have not achieved wholeness. You have not invited the full breadth of the community into that moment until you pour libations and ask for their presence. Dirges, the third concept I want you to hold on to, are the funeral songs and poems that seek to, one, discuss the legacy of the deceased person. Two, discuss the deceased to those who never met them and to explain them to them. And then finally, they help the community to determine the status or role of the deceased person, their spirit for that community going forward. Remember, I said not everybody can become a deified ancestor. So the dirge is a process to making a determination about whether or not we're going to utter this person's name in the future in our community. Many of these songs are topical and ephemeral. That is, they are composed for use at the funeral of one individual and relate to them only. Thus, among the Ilya and Tonga of Zambia, Zazutalugu, mourning songs are sung only once. They are very short and composed by a woman who mourns and thinks over the life's work of the deceased. She bases her song on this, starts to sing little by little, and adds words and melody until the song is complete. So I want to offer to you a dirge of sorts today and pay homage to Dr. Butts. Not in the form of the typical poem or song, but simply by sharing with you what I perceive to be an effective frame through which to understand his contributions to the community and ultimately suggest that he is worthy of being a deified ancestor. That's the second point. Over the decades, Morehouse College has produced some of the nation's most well-regarded exemplars of the black male excellence archetype. Dr. King, who you talked about, graduated from Morehouse College. Raphael Warnock, Jay Johnson, Julian Bond, Maynard Jackson, David Satcher, Eddie Glaude, Louis Sullivan, Lerone Bennett, and I can go on and on and on. But today we are here to discuss one of Mother Morehouse's greatest productions. For me, and I'm not a Morehouse man, but I am a man of Morehouse, which means that they gave me the title, which means I didn't go to Morehouse. Morehouse went through me. I believe that our fifth president of 21 years at SUNY Old Westbury, Dr. Calvin O. Butts III, deserves to be a member of the Morehouse pantheon of great leaders. This becomes clearer when you consider the 5 expectations of a Morehouse man. It is often said that a Morehouse man is well-dressed, well-traveled, well-read, well-spoken, and well-balanced. Well-dressed, traveled, read, spoken, balanced. Today I'm suggesting that in part, Dr. Butts' life and work can be understood in this personification of these highest ideals of the Morehouse man, or what we, when I say we, some of us in the Morehouse ether, call the moral cosmopolitan. The moral cosmopolitan. Let's knock out the first 3 wells right off the bat. Anyone who's ever laid eyes on Dr. Butts know that he was well-dressed.
Absolutely.
He could dress well. And in fact, he dressed so well, sometimes when he was preaching, he had to pause and admire himself. He looked that good. Anyone who ever spoke to Dr. Butts knows that his intellect, his insight, and his wisdom were all informed by his being a man who has traveled the world and someone who read about the world and its people and its condition as he traveled. As Francois Luc O'Donnell put it, he had a position of honor and status in our villages and communities because he was a human library. He was a human library with experiences, wisdom, and cultural richness that he passed on to you in a single conversation. To be certain, Dr. Butts was well-traveled and he was well-read. It is regarding the last 2 wells that I'd like to offer up how prolific Dr. Butts was as a leader and as a man of significance. The concept of a man of significance is often used to characterize a Morehouse man as well. Nomo, that 5th concept that I spoke about, identifies the power of the word to generate and create reality. It identifies the power of words to generate and create reality. Melefe Asante characterizes Nomo as the process undertaken in community to foster transformation in that community by naming the current reality and reimagining a future. Nomo are the ancestral spirits of the Dogon people. who are in Mali, and are derived from a Dogon word meaning to make one drink. Nomo implies the power of words to create harmony and balance in the face of disharmony. Nomo is what Dr. King had. Nomo is what Gandhi had. Nomo was the ability to, through words, transform people and to create new realities. Over the past weeks, I've gone down the rabbit hole in search of that which I did not know about Dr. Butts. You see, being a student of African American studies, my doctorate is in Africology. That means I study African people through their cultural lens. That means that I bring voice to the way in which they experience the world and not the way in which others interpret them. Okay? I didn't come to Dr. Butts as a president. I came to him as a young person who studied African people. I knew who Dr. Butts was to African people domestically and abroad, but it was only this rabbit hole experience where I discovered Dr. Butts' mastery of Nomo. More specifically, over the past weeks, I've come to recognize his ability to name the current reality and to reimagine a brighter future for Africans and other oppressed people worldwide. It was only over the past few weeks where I recognized his ability to make one drink. And it was only over the past few weeks where I witnessed his dogged pursuit of harmony and balance in the face of disharmony. That's what moves him from regular and even good to exceptional. His ability to master Nomo and to make us drink even when we didn't want to. See, I recognize what he had done as a young burgeoning scholar when he taught me to dignify the humanity of those in my community as an African American person with AIDS. Those in my community with AIDS. He was at the forefront in this regard, teaching us how to be in pursuit of harmony and balance amidst disharmony that was caused by our ignorance and our fear. You see, as a student of African American studies, I knew about his Pan-Africanist commitment when he created Africare. He demanded that African Americans obligate themselves to addressing the wanting conditions of Africans on the continent. He taught us that harmony was achieved when we are our brother's keepers. I also knew that he had created the Abyssinian Development Corporation that led to the building of homes for our elders and those who struggled to find decent housing. But I did not recognize this work within the framework of Nomo. I did not realize that he was teaching us how to be in pursuit of balance and harmony in the midst of disharmony through the prism of housing our elders who, again, what? Are our living libraries. Sure, I knew that he had created the Thurgood Marshall Academy. Did you know that too? I knew he had created the Thurgood Marshall Academy, thereby proclaiming his membership among elite African American leaders who insisted that education is our greatest social equalizer. But I did not see this as part of his word force that moved to create new realities in the lives of those who had been written off. And yes, as a former DJ, I was a DJ, right? As a former DJ in 1993, I was angry with Reverend Butts when he rolled over the hip-hop CDs. You remember that? This man took a steamroller and rolled over hip-hop records. They were records back then, right? Not CDs, right? And I was angry. You see, my consciousness was not there yet. I thought he was somebody, Dr. Butts, Reverend Butts, who I was angry with. Here was somebody who just didn't get it, when in fact, I was the one who didn't get it. But even at that time, I understood what he said when he said, you don't have to denigrate our women. You don't have to dehumanize our race. You don't have to use violent and vulgar language. But I did not see his no-mo, because I was too angry. Regarding this and his AIDS activism, I'm reminded of the proverb that says, a leader takes people where they want to go. A great leader takes people where they don't want to go, but ought to be. Dr. Butts was a great leader. A trailblazer in AIDS activism, a creator of an international AIDS organization, a housing developer for the elderly and homeless, and a creator of an academy. Dr. Butts' lifetime of work equals that of 4 or 5 of us in this room. This one man did all of that work. He was a gigantic humanitarian who built institutions that transform people's lives. He took us where we ought to be. And to add to all of that, he was a president of a college for 21 years and the leader of arguably Black America's most important church for over 30 years. There's no question that the above accomplishments make him deserving of venerated status. And for us to forever recognize his contributions to human struggle and the advancement of freedom. But it was while I was down in that rabbit hole, and I'm wrapping up, and I listened to his sermons and interviews and speeches that I realized that his being well-spoken, well-balanced, made him one of the most important leaders of the past 50 years in this nation. With every word he uttered, he consequently demonstrated the expectations of a Morehouse man and in a way that enabled everybody to seek balance and harmony amidst disharmony. Therefore, I emphatically ask each of you personally, and I make the case to African people worldwide, that because of his contribution to human struggle and because of his nomo, his word force, and its undeniable transformational power, I ask that we commit to never forgetting his works. Don't forget his memory and the lessons that he has given us all. As a token of what you can take with you as you remember the transcendent nature of Dr. Butts, I shared this final story with you. This story was shared with us during the memorial service for Dr. Butts on November 4th, whereby he angered an important New York City mayor by calling him a racist. Now, if you know Dr. Butts, if you earn it, you're going to get it. In the car, Dr. Butts' aide asked him if he was concerned about the repercussions of his actions. Dr. Butts' response to his aide was, "No, I am not worried, and do not ever relinquish your prophetic voice." That is my ask of you this evening. In your work for social justice, never, ever, ever relinquish your prophetic voice. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Tim. It was very touching, and having known and met and worked with Reverend Butts, I know it too well. Everything you mentioned, I can't add anything. That's it. That man had everything one can have. Well-dressed, well-read, well-spoken, well-traveled, everything. So he deserves that pantheon for the and many things you mentioned about African culture. I'm sure that if you discuss with some of the Indians over here, that were parallel in that things, the respect for the elderly, that kind of thing. Uh, I am impressed that usually people talk about history that is 100 years, 500, 2,000 years. And there are a couple of words to describe history humorously. But most importantly, you talk today about living history, that you see it, you witness it, you are part of it. It is not like history is something that never happened, written by a man who wasn't there. It's not like that. It is something we witness right over here. And I appreciate your things, and I hope that all of us will remember that it is your individual stand to stand up and never relinquish your responsibility and duty. With that, I request So Young Lady to continue her musical performance.
As a lifetime member of NAACP and active involved in Freeport Roosevelt in Long Island branch, as well as volunteer of Shanti Fund for a long time, Arvind and I work together in harmony because we believe when we gather, we learn something new. So I'll be performing 2 well-known spiritual songs, and then I will introduce someone who's dear to me to read the poem of Maya Angelou. So there were times when I was in South America. My mother was in coma. My father was looking for third country to travel. Much needed food I didn't have. There are times I didn't have 1 orange to eat. Until this day, it's difficult to eat a single orange without thinking about that time. So all of us who are here can find the times when we were feeling without a mother, but there's always balm to heal the sin-sick soul. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel graduated from Bank Street because I'm Bank Street child. We have Columbia and SUNY Westbury. I'm a Bank Street child. And we met in alumni meeting, and then she and I have been friends since. And you can read her lengthy bio in the booklet. And she's also a board member of many organizations and working with the educators and the children. She will share a poem right now.
It's an honor and a true privilege to be standing before this august body. Some of you I've met before, some of you never. If my mother were alive, she would say to me today, "So Donna, how do you know all these people in the room?" It is my mother's spirit and the spirit of many who have gone before us across continents, here in the US and abroad. And I really am feeling the power that gives me the courage to stand before you and to utter the words of one of the greatest writers, poetess, memorist, who was born in the United States and who traveled the world through her voice, through her nomo, if you will. And as we heard today from President Sims, putting all these concepts together, I think the woman who has penned these words is really deserving and has paved the way for so many in that regard. Today's poem is Still I Rise. The author, of course, is Maya Angelou, Dr. Maya Angelou. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like moons and like suns with the certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high, still I rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. Leaving behind the nights of terror and fear, I rise into a daybreak that's wondrously clear. I rise, bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave. I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise. I rise. I rise. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so youngly for spiritual songs, and Dr. Jones for very memorable poem of Maya Angelou, Still I Rise. Our next keynote speaker is Dr. Wab. I was talking to my son, who is practicing psychiatry in Florida, and he asked, how you get such luminary to your event? And I said, Dr. Wab, my son was impressed reading about you and the work you do. So I said that if time permits and you are lucky, when he visits us on Long Island, we'll make a point. I'll try to reach out and two of you can have a good time. And thank you very much for accepting our invitation in the shortest possible time via connections. And one of them is here, Lima Thomas, or my friend of more than 30 years, who will speak to you. So please, everyone, welcome Dr. Wang.
Good evening. The one thing I can say about us in higher education is we're used to doing things at the last minute, so it is okay. Arvin, thank you so much. I know the Consulate General had to kind of skirt out because he had another event, but I am so grateful that the Assistant Consulate General is still here with us. I'm a little tongue-tied. Still here with us. And Dr. Sams, I was very impressed in reading your bio and noting that the two of us are Temple Owls. And Temple Owls are everywhere. So Temple University is where I attended undergrad. And yes, I am now currently psychiatric researcher at Columbia University Irving Medical Center, specifically in the Department of Psychiatry. I was really grateful when I got the email. It was a phone call out the clear blue sky. I'm working on research, right? Trying to get my research off the ground. And I get a phone call, it's like, hey, Dr. B, you've done TED Talks, you speak all the time. Could you do this for us for a favor? I'm like, absolutely. And then as I was prepping this week, a little fun, and my research project was starting to blow, and at the same time I had a training, and at the same time I had a colleague to come in from Yale, and I was hosting, and I'm like, OMG, I have not started to prep. But then I thought, you know what, Bern? You've been living this, right? And a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is not only my lived experience as a Black woman, which of course you can look at me and tell, right? But also about what it means to be a Black scholar, specifically in America at this time. So thank you also, Dr. Sams, for talking about Reverend Buds. He has been a longtime partner of my colleagues and I at Columbia University. And so when he passed away, we were all completely devastated. I was in the process of the project that I'm working on, trying to launch and work with them on this project that I'm working on. So everyone was just devastated. What I will say is that Black history is not just about Black people. Black history is all of our histories. It is us as a collective body of humans and what it is it means to us. But my question to you is, why is Black history important? Black history was founded as an opportunity to uplift, to celebrate, to applaud the accomplishments of Black people who were overlooked historically. It was easy to overlook what their contributions were. So let's think about why that is, right? The 1619 project by my colleague, Dr. Hannah, who is now at Howard University, which is a historically black college and university. And what she talked about is the history of slavery here in the United States. And why that's so important is because as a result of history, what would happen is the slave owners would actually take credit for a lot of the black people's accomplishments. And so Carter G. Woodson, in his righteous indignation, said, you have all these people who are stealing our accomplishments, but you're not giving us credit. So, how many of you all have ever used a GPS? Show of hands. I got 2 different kinds of GPSs on my phone. I've got Waze, I've got Google Maps. But how many of you knew that a black woman created the technology behind that? We all know about our Apple phones. How many of you guys are Apple folks? That's what I thought. The country was devastated when the founder of Apple passed away. But did you know he passed away the very same day that Derek Bell passed away? And if you don't know that name, you know his work. I'm about to prove it to you. How many of you have heard of critical race theory? So whether you're a legal scholar or not, you've heard about critical race theory, right? They're talking about it in Florida. They're talking about it in Texas. They're talking about it all over the country. Critical race theory has several different tenets. One of the tenets of critical race theory is called interest convergence. Interest convergence specifically talks about how black people's civil rights are not actually going to be actualized unless it converges with the interests of white people. And why is that important? My little speech is on my iPad, my iPhone, right? Why is that important? Because it basically underscores something that we all know. So whether you are here in the United States, or whether you're back home in India, or whether you're in Korea, or whether you're in Thailand, what we all have been trained is that whiteness has value. Regardless of what ethnicity you come from, whiteness have value. And so I have some Indian students who work in my lab, and one of the things we talked about several months ago when we were talking about working with black women, and I specifically work with black women who are survivors of intimate partner violence. One of the things she talked about was, Dr. B, a lot of us, even in India, bleach our skin because blackness is seen as bad. And so not only my folks in India, but my colleague from Malaysia, they bleached their skin. And in the height of the George Floyd protests that erupted around the globe, the one thing that absolutely everyone had to come to grips with is the fact that all of us, regardless of our ethnicity, internalize the hatred of blackness. And so we do all sorts of things to disavow blackness. And so right here in the United States, on Long Island, which is where I live, we have a number of what we call sunset towns. And sunset towns specifically are towns where very few black people live. And the black people who are in the town by sunset, they're leaving the town. And so one such example of that is Garden City. So for 14 years, I was an educator as well as an administrator at Adelphi University, which is in Garden City. I knew that a certain day and time, depending on where I was, it was not a good thing for me to be a black woman driving through Garden City because I did not belong. I have wonderful recollection of getting pulled over by the police. I happened to drive a Mercedes. I stopped at the stop sign, and what happened? The cop pulled me over, gave me a ticket, trumped up ticket. and fuming, I go into the office, and my colleague says, "Bern, what happened?" I'm like, "Driving while black." And they're like, what are you talking about? Right? Because Adelphi is a predominantly white institution. And so when you work at a predominantly white institution, oftentimes you have to educate people on your lived experience because they don't know what it means to be black. They don't know what it means to be brown. They don't know what it means to be Indian or Asian. And so I had to tell them that black people routinely stopped and questioned and challenged. And so me and my little smart, savvy self, I learned how to show them who I was without being disrespectful. My first job out of undergrad, I worked at the NBC affiliate in Philadelphia, which is located in Lower Merion Township. And for those of you who don't know where Lower Merion Township is, you've heard of Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant was from Lower Merion Township. And the cop pulls me over and he's like, "Ma'am, you didn't stop at the stop sign." I'm thinking to myself, "Sir, but I did. But it's okay." He's like, driver's license and registration." I said, "Absolutely." So me and my little smart self pulls out my NBC 10 badge and hands it to him. And my registration, he's like, "Ma'am, this isn't your license." I knew that, right? I knew it wasn't my license, but I needed him to know who I was. Because in Lower Merion Township, you don't see people like me driving in nice cars. The people they see are oftentimes people they would expect to have be involved in criminal activities. And so, having worked in sunset towns most of my career and worked in predominantly white institutions, I understand the fact that we as people of color oftentimes live and are marginalized, and we must contend with overlapping intersexual, multi-actual points of marginalization. One point is we're not white. There are maybe 2 or 3 people in this room who would probably be considered white. It also means, what is our gender, right? As I'm not only black, but I'm also a black woman. And what does that mean? That means that there may be places and spaces that Dr. Sams can put his foot down, that if I do the same thing Dr. Sams does, I'll be characterized as an angry black woman. I'll be characterized as a sapphire. I'll be characterized as a Jezebel. And what is that? What I just shared with you are caricatures of black women. They're caricatures that have been used, as my colleague Patricia Hill Collins says, as controlling images. They've been used to control the narrative of who we are and how we present ourselves in the world around us. Here's the one thing I have to say. We here in the world would be in a really bad place without black people. Why? Some of the best and most impactful inventions are resulting from black people. I just had the opportunity with my colleague, Dr. Taffy, to meet Stacy. If you've ever heard of MoviePass, MoviePass was developed by a black man in tech. LeBron James. Everybody knows LeBron, right? You're not alive if you don't know LeBron James. Something is wrong, right? COVID-19, the COVID-19 vaccine. The technology behind all of these vaccines was developed by a young black woman who is currently on faculty at Harvard University. And you know, COVID-19 impacted us regardless of our place in space in the world. And it is still impacting our global economy. And who helped to save that? A black woman. Blood transfusions, for those of you who work in medicine. Blood transfusions are normal now in hospitals. But if it wasn't for black men, we would not have blood transfusions. I spoke a little bit about Derek Bell in law. He's a critical legal scholar who had the wonderful wherewithal to talk about all of the ills in society, and he did it with love, grace, and kindness. We talk about entertainment. Beyonce is the premier entertainer in the world, and she's a black woman. Yes, my sisters, When it talks about fashion, Leon Talley, who passed away last year, he was the creative director of Vogue magazine, fashion. Not just him, Virgil Abloh, he was with Louis Vuitton. So for those of us who love shopping on Fifth Avenue, many of the fashions on Fifth Avenue are as a result of Black people. When it comes to engineering, Katherine Johnson, and if you don't know that name, think NASA. Think even the movie Hidden Figures, one of my favorite movies, by the way. Still, despite all of our accomplishments, we as Black people, regardless of your ethnicity, still remain undervalued. We remain underpaid. We remain overworked. So I ask each of us here in the room today, how many times have we been the culprit of what it is I just talked about? How many times have we been a culprit of not believing someone because they were Black, or being scared of someone because they were Black, or not valuing their voice because it was a Black person who said it, of being more likely to remand as educators, to remand or suspend someone because they're Black? How oftentimes do we disavow the voices of Black women who have said to them, you know what, something's wrong with my baby. I haven't felt my baby kick. And you know what that accounts to? What that leads to higher rates of mortality across the board. And guess what? Even if you're not Black, you're affected by the racism that is prevalent here in the United States, as well as in many of our home countries. How oftentimes are Black and brown voices marginalized? Or not only that, you may be brown and may be accepted, but people will say, you know what, I can't understand what you're talking about. You're being marginalized. If people are expecting you to be the model minority, but you're struggling in school, what does that mean for you? What does that stress mean for you? My roommate in undergraduate was a Korean woman, and she struggled. She struggled in science. But her parent told her that she had to be a pharmacist. She's now a social worker and wonderful. But our second year, first semester of our second year, she attempted suicide. And why did she do that? Because her parents demanded that she be something that she wasn't. And she was too ashamed to go to extra help and to get the tutoring. And so I question to you, how often are we replicating and internalizing the racism and hurting ourselves, and hurting the next generation, and hurting our people? And so I want to encourage you to know that Black history is not just a day event. And I want to truly celebrate the fact that here at the India Consulate General, that you're one of the few Consulate Generals, because I looked this up, that are actually celebrating Black History Month. So I want to applaud you for that, because that doesn't happen. So thank you for acknowledging the fact that Black people, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their religion, regardless of their gender, that they matter here in the India Consulate. That right there, to me, speaks volumes, and that is powerful. So thank you. I also want to say that it is important for us that when we do make it, whatever your it is, and I don't know that we ever, like Michelle Obama, we're all in a place of becoming. I don't know that we ever get to that place. For whatever you get to where you're going, and along the way, I want to challenge everyone in this room to lift as you climb. When you see a little Black boy, when you see a little Black girl, when you see a little brown boy and a brown girl, to lift them, to encourage them, to take the time out to let them know that who you are is important. Who you are is valuable. And why is that? It's because words are seeds. And every day we're planting what we want to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Waller. It wasn't my plan, but it took me 55 years ago when I came to this country to do my master's in engineering. I was living in Brooklyn. Went to Brooklyn Poly, now it's part of New York University. And I would walk from Adelphi Street and I see, which is now fancy area, Fort Greene. But at that time, it was very, and as coming from another country, I can't tell the difference, but as time passes by, I see the same faces. And year after year, I would visit Brooklyn while I moved to Long Island. But two important points. I was blessed and lucky that I was the first non-white person hired by my employer. And as an engineering student with structural major, I know the structural deficiency, not in mechanical sense of bridges and planes and everything, but real life society. And I've been blessed that people have accepted me with my multitude of activities, and we are making changes slowly without holding any position. But we understand, and there are sometimes they say that diplomacy is the best way to avoid the war. And we are trying to practice that profession so that in society people forget whether he is a black, brown, white, yellow. You look at person's soul and let your soul talk to that soul. The rest of the things are worthless in a sense for your own personal growth. Sorry about that getting off the ground. Now, do we have the last performance from So Young Lee's short one before people are hungry and waiting for the delicious dinner? So
You just said it. I'm between the dinner. Well, spiritual or dinner. I think we need both. I think in Indian General Council's place we are becoming friendly and understanding community having this today. I'm tomorrow part of the youth NAACP's Freeport to Roosevelt celebration as well. Past, present, and future. I think the following songs, we can think about faith, hope, and love. And not only because I was NAACP member, I became very much into spiritual songs, but because we all have our ancestors, we all have those ones we lost during the COVID. So let these two songs be tribute to our beloved community's leaders during the Black History Month, those Black leaders who paved us. And also, I want to thank Korean community friends who made it to this event. And I think diversity, equity, and inclusion starts something like this. So let's give a round of applause to all of us. So we will do a song called The Deep River, which is most times sung in the funerals to present to future going forward, lifting our spirits. So here it comes. My home is
face spiritual things, no religious affiliation, so to speak. And I'm very glad that both of you managed to come over here. Three of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
With that thing, I think after all events like this possible with many people's help, one of them is key volunteer of Shanti Fund, Mr. Paresh Rawal, who will do a difficult but necessary job between you and Dinesh. Delicious dinner. Paresh bhai, floor is yours. This is the Shanti Fund calendar I'm talking about. Before you leave, if you have not received by mail, please pick it up.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Paresh Rawal, a volunteer of Shanti Fund. Our special thanks to guest speakers, Dr. Timothy Sams, President of SUNY Old Westbury, and Dr. Donald Waller. Thank you. Many thanks to So Young Lee, Multicultural Council of New York, Dr. Donna Jones, Joel Proctor, drummer, Candy Togunaga, guitarist, John Colonna, pianist, and most importantly, staff of Consulate General of India, in particular, Ms. Preeti and her colleagues. Thank you. Person who played a very crucial role of coordinating details of the event with Shanti Fund and the Consulate, Sri Vipul Dev. Today was his day, but he was, understand his absence, being a 3-day-old father of a baby boy. Thank you to Varun Jeffrey. Lastly, without whose vision, our very own Consul General, Sri Randeep Jaiswal, this program wouldn't have happened. He has taken special likings of Shanti Fund's activity and he has graced every event of Shanti Fund unless he is not in town. Ladies and gentlemen, dinner is awaiting, so please join for the